longer live may reach more videos. Longer live videos. No, I don't want you to cancel. Hello. SJJ. Hello, Bike Winner 86. Hello. Oh, we got two. Nice to meet you. I am work on. Hey guys. Yeah. Right? Well, I'm on this live, but it's weird because people don't really interact. And I know what it's like to accidentally join a live, so I don't know. What's that?
Well, just gaming talk,
You enjoying it?
Thank you for doing this, Michelle.
Yeah. Sam requested a whole rice for just her, so.
I know, right?
Oh, I have someone who's joined me. Hello. Happy you're here.
Honestly. Yeah, except
Well, hello. Well, I only have one person watching, and it doesn't tell me who you are. I don't know if this going live is worth it.
Oh, like on Insta or TikTok or something?
Yeah.
It is because it actually, the more you do it, the more it pushes all your content to people's For You pages.
But people don't interact with me or say anything.
Yeah, I know, but that doesn't matter. You just gotta start talking and just
Okay.
talk about something and then. Are you gonna want more, Michelle?
No, that's okay.
You do want some. I just think, I honestly, I'm really grateful that guy. Self-work.
Hello.
3 of them. Well, he ran away to help his other man.
Hello. Don't know if any of you are interested in book club. interested in the Reconciliation Action Group. I'm not too sure. Anyway, hello to you all. I'd love to hear how your day is. I just got back from Ottawa. It was beautiful. So I haven't seen any of the Stampede yet this year. Hello. Good to see you both. Thank you for coming. This is my first one that we've done live. And I was thinking about reading, but I wanted to give people an opportunity to ask questions in that too. Or tell me a joke. Some of your usernames I don't recognize you, but that's okay. Maybe I do know you. Hello. Well, hello. And how are you today? Where are you watching from? Hello. New folks. Where are you watching from? Tell me a bit about yourself. Or maybe if you have a question about reconciliation or book club or whatever. Chazzy Gator. Hello. Hello. So not very talkative. That's okay. Not all of us are. Oh, hello. Good, thank you. Hope you are well. I hope you are well too. Where are you TikToking from? I Build Stuff Guy. That's a great name. Well, you can make it if you want to keep talking with me. I don't mind. Obviously, I'm eating. Well, I really came on here in order to promote Indigenous wellness, and if you are Indigenous, oh, you're a couple of hours north of me. What are you having? I just got off the plane, so I went and picked up some Chinese food. because I just I'm really jet lagged. Yeah. What are you gonna make for supper? Yeah, it's the thing about having a name of Calgarian. At least everyone knows where I am, hey? Mmm, that sounds good. Well, I'll have to take some out tonight. Gotta get some blueberries here today, too. I have to have at least a cup of blueberries a day and a cup of greens. So that's gonna be next on my agenda. I gotta go buy some lemons for my gut. Hello, Light 1961. Yeah, it's interesting being on TikTok. I have these user followers, but I don't know who they are, and they don't necessarily interact. So, but yeah, tomorrow's book club. I do chapters 3 and 4 on the National Inquiry. So, yeah, if you want to join us, you can. If not, my last podcasts have like chapters 1 and 2. We'll get through it all. I guess they're tough conversations, though. Not everybody wants to read that or hear it, but it's kind of, you can't talk about reconciliation and not do it, right? So that's what I do. And it looks like we've had people come and go. And that's okay. I don't really know what to expect out of doing live TikToks. I just hope that that gives an opportunity to talk to people who are interested in reconciliation. Maybe anti-racism work. I don't know. Tell me one of your last favorite books that you liked. Or maybe tell me one of your last books that you didn't like. Oh my God, is chicken fried rice the best? What else do you like to have with your mule deer stew? If that's a thing that you have like commonly. I'm reading Richard Wagamese's Embers. So good. Oh, it's amazing. I the last book that my late uncle wrote was about hockey in Indian residential schools. So we knew when Richard Wagamese did Indian Horse, it was my uncle's story. And sure enough, it was. So, but he's such a great writer. It's such a beautiful, beautiful book, The Indian Horse. And you know, to this day, people still watch that show and, you know, read that book. So cool, yep. But I heard that Embers is really healing, so it's a book I should read. Hourly ranking. Yellow. I don't even know what that stuff means. I actually had to Google last week because I actually didn't know I could go live. I thought you had to have more viewers. So then I was like, well, I'll try to do it Sunday afternoons. And then my plane was delayed and I napped. So I actually missed a little bit there. Hello, folks. Happy to see you here. I was just asking other folks what they just read. I'd love to hear from you if you're a reader, if you're not a reader, and what book you're reading. Tomorrow is the National Inquiry, chapters 3 and 4. And if you missed the chapters 1 and 2, it's in my podcast. If you're interested in past podcasts, I have a YouTube channel that has it on there too, if you kind of want to watch instead of just listen. It doesn't go live though. We record it and then put it up. So and it's just back to you and I. I don't really know how to interact with the live videos anyway myself, so I do get it. I'm gonna have to get better at this. Hopefully encourage more people. Oh, by the way, are you Indigenous? Do you identify as Indigenous or non-Indigenous? Non-native? Yesterday was Nunavut Day. I don't know how many Inuk followers I have, but I follow lots. They're great. And in fact, because I'm Sahtu Dene, I was wondering what the difference between Sahtu and being Inuk was, and of course language, culture, but also the tree line. That's what separates us. And my pupper's here now investigating, see if I spilled any rice, which I know I did. Let him lick that old. Love my puppers. Do you have a puppy? That's all right. What I was gonna do now that I've had a bit to eat is I'll probably start reading from the National Inquiry, and if people are interested, awesome. If they're not, that's cool too. So we'll go from there. Just unplug this, I guess. Head on up there. I don't know. Zoom I find really kills my battery, so I'll have to see if the TikTok is the same before I get set up over there with my book. But if you have other requests, I could read other books, I suppose. It's just that tomorrow's the book club, so just makes sense to do that. No comments, that's okay. I'm just gonna lock my front door here. Oh, I also get a lot of stuff on Twitter, a lot of notifications. I don't know if any of you heard the Klondike Papers. I'm quite political, so I pay attention to a lot of that. And always shocked of what folks seem to be okay with, the standard quo when it comes to politics. So, but that's why I get involved. That's why I hope others consider getting involved, whether it's Indian politics or not. All right, got my cord here. Set up my backdrop. I like my backdrop more for my family. They, just to respect their privacy. We don't have like a big house and a fancy office like some folks do. So I just make do. Of course, trying to do it one-handed is a little difficult. Oh, it's okay, I'm almost there. There. All right. And I guess I need the book. So let's go grab the book. Gotta get that. There's an Alberta report with 113 pathways. So we'll see if they're serious and they do any of them. I highly doubt it. Yeah, I don't know what issues really matter to you folks. Low battery. Guess I better get this going. I don't know now though if we can see that. Try to get the lighting better. Much prefer my computer, but my I don't know how to do that with TikTok. It's on my phone. But this old lady's gonna figure it out. This old granny. I will figure this stuff out. Right. Silent mode. All right. Hopefully you can still hear me. Had silent mode on there for a second. How am I gonna get this cord to not like move this too much? There. That's better. There. This is kind of more what I envisioned about an hour ago. Oh well, there's only so much time in a day. And the more I get done, the better. Just gonna turn off my computer here. Hello. I'm just gonna read, answer any questions that people have. Invite people to our book club tomorrow. If you're interested in that, we had Jody Wilson Rainbow, and we're gonna have Jesse Wente, and this month is chapters 3 and 4 of the National Inquiry. Love to have you if you're interested. I'm gonna shut down or do the sleep mode here. Get my throat a little ready to read. My friend here, she's making some stew, which is yummy. Oh, that's better. All right. Okay, so I was already starting to kind of read this. I went through some stories here. So, did the chapter 1 here. Yeah, maybe I'll just keep reading from here. Oh no, I did start chapter 3 as well. Anyway, Michelle S., the one I looked up to. I'm listening while I cook, thanks. Oh, I'm so grateful. When Michelle first went missing, the newspaper didn't even use her name. Her family came to the National Inquiry to tell us about the strong, loving, driven person Michelle really was. My daughter Michelle was 24 when she went missing and was a beautiful child. Like from when she was a baby, she was just always smiling. And then when she got used to being a big sister, she loved Danny to pieces. The same with Tony. She was like a second mom when we weren't there, you know. She deserved better, you know. Oh, and you can't question fate. I know that. I guess I'm here also to remind you, my daughter wasn't a working girl. She was loved, you know. She had a lot of people that still cry for her. So this is from Mona S., mother to Michelle S., and that was in Vancouver on April 6, 2018. My oldest sister, Michelle, it was hard to put into words what she was and what she meant to the family and I. She was intelligent, caring, persistent, resilient, beautiful, kind, and extremely soft-hearted. She was so much more than that. She was my second mother. She was the one who gave me haircuts, the one who made me dinner when I was hungry, the one I look up to, the one who made me my birthday special, and the no one who loved or looked after me when no one else was around. She loved butterflies and the Little Mermaid. She wanted to be a stylist. She wanted to be somebody. Around my 10th birthday, my mother succumbed to the pull of addiction once more. She was not around much during this time, and it was up to Michelle to take care of me. She did the best she could. She did a fantastic job. Michelle S. was my sister, and I miss her every day. Anthony S., brother to Michelle S., heard it the same day in Vancouver. In the third case, a First Nation woman named Michelle S. lived in Burnaby, British Columbia, had different obstacles for accessing the services she needed. For example, when her mother divorced her abusive father, her father had a legal obligation to provide child support. However, the worker assigned to the family refused to help them collect this child support. Michelle's mother, a residential school survivor, developed significant addictions and left an 18-year-old Michelle to try to support the family. Child Protective Services became involved, and the younger children were separated into different homes. Michelle, however, since she was too old for the welfare system, didn't receive any support. One of the biggest challenges for Michelle was getting support from her band to join the aesthetic program. While the band funded education for her siblings, they rejected her request because they didn't consider it a career worth funding. Having been denied the funding and with few options, Michelle eventually ended up working in the sex trade with her mother. In 2007, Michelle was found murdered. The perpetrator has never been tried for her death. Unlike in Desiree's case, services existed that were supposed to help and support and protect the family, both provincially and from her own band. However, many barriers to actually receiving these services ultimately put her in a very difficult position where she was targeted for violence. Looking at the truths shared by survivors and family members through the intersectional lenses allow us to take into account how their identities interact with different systems, and how it means that we can better address how those systems need to be transformed so that the governments and institutions can turn dangerous counters into safe ones. Using an intersectional approach also puts a person's individual lived experience in context, revealing systemic or underlying causes of discrimination. Survivor Alayla M. recognizes these intersections and motivates her to speak out for others in the same situation. This story is going to hopefully empower those victims who are victimized across Canada to see a light and to understand that they are a victim, but they also help identify their roles and responsibilities moving in from that victimization into survival road and into the warrior role they should be in. Beverly Jacobs, a former president of the Native Women's Association of Canada, explains, just understand and care what happens to Indigenous women in communities. By considering those intersections between racism and sexism, I hope we can change systemic barriers to equality for our country. As Jacobs makes clear, much of the testimony we heard in the concerned systems and institutions underscore the importance of understanding the lived experiences of Indigenous people and the gendered experiences of Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA people in particular. Seeing how different systems work to oppress Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people is part of an intersectional approach to studying encounters. As scholar Nicole Clark suggested, this means drawing theory and understanding from the everyday lives of young Indigenous women in context. The intersectional approach puts a person's individual lived experience in context to reveal systemic or underlying causes of discrimination. Understanding the connections among systems, institutions, and people and how they create further harm or help keep people safe is vitally important in finding a way forward through concrete solutions to address violence. No new questions, so I'm just reading from the National Inquiry. If you're new, I'm on page 111. I'm just about to read 4 pathways that maintain colonial violence. I have my book club tomorrow. You're welcome to join it, and we're going to be doing chapters 3 and 4, but this is still before then. As we explore further in chapter 4, colonial violence is not a simple construction. Psychiatric philosopher and anti-colonial theorist Frantz Fanon observed that violence within the context of colonization goes beyond simple administrative policies or structures oriented towards physical control, but it's also inclusive of attempts to erase or eliminate Indigenous people, along with economic restrictions. The structure of colonial violence, which looks to the complete destruction and assimilation of Indigenous peoples, also includes structures of what sociologist Pierre Bourdieu terms symbolic violence, including practices of exclusion and the idea that Indigenous cultures and people are inferior, as it is promulgated by educational systems, religious systems, and in more modern sense by media. In their descriptions of encounters, families and survivors who spoke at the National Inquiry consistently referred to 4 general ways to which their experiences were rooted in colonialism, both historic and modern forms. These 4 pathways continue to enforce the historic and contemporary manifestations of colonialism that leads to additional violence. They are historical, multi-generational, and intergenerational trauma, social and economic marginalization, maintaining the status quo and institutional lack of will, and ignoring the agency and expertise of Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. As we look closely at these upcoming chapters, violence is more likely to occur when these 4 forms of colonial violence intersect with the lives of Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. Historical, multi-generational, and intergenerational trauma. Throughout the testimony, family members, survivors, knowledge keepers, experts, and other witnesses often use the word trauma as a way to describe the deep emotional, spiritual, and psychological pain or soul wounds they and their loved ones endured as a result of losing a loved one or surviving violence. Many Indigenous people hold a collective trauma as a result of these and many other losses inflicted through various forms of colonial violence. Family members and survivors told us that this context was significant to understanding underlying causes of violence against Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. The idea of trauma is often categorized by medical and psychological ways of thinking to diagnose and individualize pain, suffering, or any other ways a person responds to a traumatic experience. This perspective does not necessarily align with Indigenous ways of understanding harm, healing, grieving, and wellness. It does not properly acknowledge the source of people's suffering within these systems that have provoked it. As we will explore in upcoming chapters, many of the encounters that witness described showed moments in which their missing or murdered loved one is blamed for the violence they experienced or for the choices they made afterwards to cope with that violence. Indigenous practitioners and researchers have adopted the concept of trauma to recognize the distinct experience of colonialism as a source of trauma. For example, in her testimony as an expert witness during the inquiry's hearing on child and family welfare, Dr. Amy Bombay talked about the importance of Lakota social worker Maria Yellow Horse Braveheart's development of the concept of historical trauma to refer to the cumulative emotional and psychological wound over the lifespan and across generations emancipating from mass group trauma. Braveheart also introduced the concept of historical trauma response, This idea reframes challenges such as abuse, addiction, suicidal thoughts, which are often seen as personal failings and understandably responses to trauma of colonial violence. As understandably responses to the. Okay. Other trauma theorists refer to multi-generation and intergenerational trauma to emphasize the fact that colonial violence creates traumatic experiences that are passed on through generations within a family, community, or people. Again, as Amy Bombay explained, these concepts emphasize the cumulative effects that were transferred across generations, and that trauma interacts with contemporary stressors and aspects of colonialism like racism. For Bombay, these concepts are foundational for creating meaningful support and change, because without the understanding that people have a tendency to blame Aboriginal peoples for their social and health inequities and resist policies addressing them. God knows. That's my everyday. Coming across people that think they know best and won't listen to us. Okay, that is a little too hot, so I had to take the sun off. All right, so I'll just keep reading. And again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate. If you have something to add, don't hesitate. If you want to join our book club tomorrow, please do. In describing encounters that led to violence, almost all the witnesses described a surrounding context marked with the multi-generational and intergenerational trauma of colonial violence. This trauma was inflicted through the loss of land, forced relocations, residential schools, and the 60s scoop, and ultimately set the stage for further violence, including the ongoing crises of over-incarceration and of child apprehensions, along with systemic poverty and other critical factors. Witness Carol B. shared her perspective about the impact of intergenerational trauma on her relationship with herself and others. The intergenerational trauma brought on by the residential schools has really impacted our families in a negative way. How can you possibly learn to love and value yourself when you are constantly told daily that you are of no value and that we need to take the Indian out of you? How could you value or love yourself? And I think that's really fair. And I think that's what a lot of our youth struggle with. As Bombay pointed out, after generations of children experienced with residential school context, children went back to their community with neither traditional skills nor access to dominant group resources. Victims and perpetrators were sent back to the same communities, and the effects of trauma and altered social norms also contributed to these ongoing cycles that were catalyzed in residential schools. As the national inquiry listened to the voices of the sons, daughters, nieces, nephews, sisters, brothers, mothers, parents, grandparents of those who have lost loved ones, it became clear that the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people is yet another way in which historical and collective trauma of Indigenous peoples continues. In her testimony, Eva P. described the trauma that she carries following the disappearance of her older sister. You know, I've been going to counseling for the past 2 years. I've been seeing 2 different therapists. I go through my ups and downs. I isolate myself for 6 months after Misty went missing. I almost died. It's tough, and I can't even imagine, this is a Canada-wide issue. There's more people. There's a lot more people in my situation, which is heartbreaking. Still no. The intergenerational trauma brought on by residential schools has really impacted our family in a negative way. Oh, they just did kind of like a bubble of what I just said. Social and economic marginalization. Another root cause of the disappearance of deaths of Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit is the social and economic conditions in which they live. It is compounded by the lack of political power that systems and institutions have afforded them to speak out. These conditions are a result of colonial governments, institutions, systems, and policies that actively work to ensure their social, economic, and related political marginalization. They are rooted in historic dispossession from the land as well as current policies. As many witnesses shared, it will be explored in the subsequent chapters. Indigenous peoples experience poverty, homelessness, food insecurity, unemployment, and barriers to education and employment at much higher rates than non-Indigenous people. Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit experience social and economic marginalization at even higher rates. Again, it is essential to recognize with the high rates of poverty and these other factors that are a result of colonial systems with which Indigenous people are trying to survive. Many reports have documented that people experiencing poverty, lack of housing, food insecurity, unemployment, and other conditions that make it difficult to meet one's basic needs are at a much higher risk of being targeted for violence. Witnesses who shared their stories with the National Inquiry echoed these well-known facts. In her story, Marlene J. Connected her inability to find safe housing to multiple experiences of sexual violence. I would say I was raped 3, maybe 4 times a week. I don't know. You have to ask the men that did the raping. I was just trying to survive. Because I was homeless, they decided they would take advantage of that situation. Other encounters involved women's attempts to access shelters, counseling, education, or other supports in their own communities who demonstrated how social and economic marginalization occurs at the level of community in ways that increase the risk for further violence. For example, frontline worker Connie Greyeyes described the distinct challenges Indigenous women face when they live in northern communities that have become part of the resource development economy. She explained that because of the lack of shelters and transitional housing and the high cost of living in the north, it is near impossible for a woman to actually leave a relationship and not live in deep poverty. She went on to describe how this economic vulnerability makes staying physically safe even harder for women living in violent relationships. Many women are just one argument with their spouse away from being on the streets. And I can 100% agree with that. As the National Inquiry listened to stories describing the context surrounding the disappearance of their loved ones, it became clear that the relationships that were used to deny the basic needs of Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit, it was the denial of social and economic security that led to violence. Maintaining the status quo and institutional lack of will. In describing the factors and contexts that lead to violence in their own and their loved ones' lives, families and survivors have clearly pointed out the role of institutions and systems playing in creating conditions that make their violence possible. In describing their encounters with the child welfare system, the justice system, the healthcare system, and with police, schools, and universities, and even some advocacy and anti-violence agencies, witnesses commonly spoke of an institutional culture that individualized the challenges they faced, rather than recognize that these challenges were a reflection of the way the institutions contribute to Indigenous stereotypes. As Dolores S. explains, the system involved all respond that Nadine was at fault and communicated it via body language, word usage, and demeanor in speaking to the family. Their insensitivity to the family and uncompassionate response to Nadine's serious injuries exemplifies deeply ingrained attitudes and prejudices they hold. When institutions see the challenges Indigenous peoples face as individual issues or personal failings, they fail to protect the very people they are meant to serve. Again, following negative encounters with police, many witnesses say they no longer feel safe to reach out to police when they are in danger, fearing that the police themselves may also inflict further violence. These experiences of violence, predation with impunity, were a chief contributor to the reluctance of women, girls, and Two-Spirit people to trust institutions. Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people commonly confront racist, sexist, and other discriminatory attitudes in their encounters with institutions, along with discrimination in the wilder world. I should tell you a story. So I just got back from Ottawa. Twice I was randomly selected. But, back to what these things are saying, they don't even see their own discrimination. Day-to-day interactions with people as well as media representation of Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit. Through the National Inquiry process, many family members and survivors also described examples where the institutions and those that work for them are the source of further physical, sexual, and psychological violence due to stereotypical views of Indigenous people. I get to see these pictures. There's one here in Calgary, Alberta, and they say it's the Union of BC Indian Chiefs making a submission. But honestly, I recognize the banner and some of the folks behind it. So it's just nice to see people I know who have been strong advocates. In speaking in the role institutions play in contributing to the violence in all forms that persists today, many witnesses pointed out a blatant lack of moral and political will for real change. Witnesses widely acknowledge that governments and institutions' failure to implement the many well-known and well-documented recommendations that advocates, community organizations, and government commissions have already made demonstrated a lack of real concern for the violence endured by Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people, including the inconsistent use of gender-based and culturally relevant analysis of government programs and policies. This lack of concern blocks the formation of positive relationships and limits the process for transforming harmful encounters into positive ones. Still listening? Thank you for listening still. Ignoring the expertise and agency of Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. In describing the context around the violence they experienced, as well as the reasons why that violence had gone for so long, witnesses regularly pointed to encounters that denied and acknowledged expertise and agency held by Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit. The failure to value these understandings also points the need to build relationships. Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people have gifted the National Inquiry with countless truths that make it clear that they are powerful, caring, and resourceful leaders, teachers, healers, providers, protectors, and more, including those whose lives have been shaped by violence. They demonstrated both an understanding of the factors that can help to improve safety and a high commitment, action, and agency that can help reduce violence. We were reminded over and over again that the National Inquiry itself is a result of tireless and creative work of Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people who have been fighting for years to have their voices and stories heard and have their answers to their crises of violence and of lives put in the first place. Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people have solutions to ending violence in their lives. Despite this, the witnesses described in their encounters of colonial governments, institutions, and agencies, as well within individual relationships and communities, more often than not, other people or institutions actively denying them the opportunity to bring these solutions forward and create meaningful change. God, isn't that true? As we will implore, and here's the thing, like, even today, as we do this work, I see regularly us say we need to do X, Y, and Z, and they still pick and choose something pretty from over here to work on. And I'll give you an example. Today, Mayor Jyoti Gondak said that she doesn't want to use the term her worship. She wants to, she sees that as a colonial construct, and in the spirit of reconciliation, to not use that terminology. And I just thought, out of all of the things that you can do, that is the most low bar thing you could possibly do. We don't care about your title of your worship. I care about you implementing 231 calls to justice. I care about you implementing 94 calls to action. This whole your worship thing is nothing in comparison to the constant approval of colonialism. They're constantly approving new neighborhoods and urban sprawl without any economic subsidies to Indigenous people and no consultation when it comes to Treaty 7. So, it's such bullshit to me to hear people, the point I'm trying to make is that ignoring the expertise and agency of Indigenous women is just like every day. And the answers are there, and they've always chose to ignore them, and here we are. We're still fighting for this. Anyway, I'll keep reading. I just get kind of ranty as I read this. As we explore in this report, the denial of the wisdom, knowledge, and expertise of Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people happens in many different ways. This may be through media's depiction of a survival in ways that erase her many accomplishments to focus on her risky lifestyle, or through bureaucratic policies that deny funding to Indigenous women's grassroots agencies. It may also happen through a general belief that an Indigenous woman living in poverty cannot be the most powerful and insightful voice in any committee or initiative working for change. In all of these scenarios, witnesses emphasize encounters such as these that even momentarily deny the strength, wisdom, and agency of Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people that rest at the heart of ongoing violence. Duh. Still just you and I. Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people as rights holders. It is clear we need to insist on solutions for ending violence against Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people that focus on addressing the underlying systemic causes of violence, such as the ones we outlined above. Nonetheless, recommendations that focus on root causes such as these have been made many, many times before, and little has changed. Tired of the lack of action on previous recommendations and the lack of meaningful action to address the underlying conditions that perpetuate violence, many Indigenous women and Two-Spirit people, organizations, and others were clear that the national inquiry needed to talk about the disappearances and deaths of Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people as a violation of their Indigenous and human rights through a gendered lens. As our interim report pointed out, colonization has devastating impacts on all Indigenous peoples, but the experiences of First Nation, Inuit, and Métis women and girls, as well as Indigenous peoples who don't identify as just male or female, are distinct in some respects from those of boys and men. Building on these reports and centering female perspectives allow us to reframe the way we look at Indigenous women and girls. They are not only victims or survivors of colonial violence, but holders of inherent and constitutional treaty and human rights that are still being violated. Yes. Ugh, that feels good even saying. Hello. I'm just reading from the National Inquiry. You are more than welcome to ask questions. Tomorrow is chapters 3 and 4. And it looks like my counter is telling me that it may bump me out of here. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. But message me if you're interested in joining our book club. It's open to everybody. This message is woven within our approach to analyze the encounters and relationships that are significant to understanding violence. Encounters not only teach us about the causes of violence, they also teach us about how Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit peoples' Indigenous and human rights are either protected or denied. As we will develop through the final report, positioning our discussion of these encounters and their root causes in relation to inherent Indigenous and human rights will continue to implore. We will explore significant historical and ongoing rights violations in the 4 areas: the rights to culture, the right to health, the right to security, and the right to justice. These themes are prominent ones within both human and Indigenous contexts and affirm the importance of addressing the crisis of violence They are not presented in order of priority or of importance. In fact, what our own testimony demonstrates is the interconnectedness of all of these ideas and priorities, and the need to look at these as interdependent and indivisible. For each of these 4 areas of rights violations, we consider both international, human rights-based, indigenous-based understandings of the right to women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. These rights encompass the full range of socio-economic and political rights that are significant and meaningful change requires. When we talk about culture, we're also talking about all of these necessary tools, supports, and resources required to enable the full realization of these rights, including social, economic, political rights. These rights, these right areas are also necessarily broad because of the great diversity of Indigenous people who share their truths concerning the need for basic rights, in addition to specific supports in key areas like education, housing, standard of living, and health services. Indigenous peoples have their own understandings of rights based off of their own laws, traditional knowledge systems, and worldviews, which are often expressed through stories. These rights are not determined by international agreements, Canadian legislation, or Supreme Court rulings. They are an expression of Indigenous women's, girls, and Two-Spirits' proper place and power. At the same time, a variety of human rights instruments dealing with these themes can offer a tool for accountability and decolonization if the solutions are placed within the context of the 4 root causes of violence: intergenerational trauma through colonization, marginalization, lack of institutional will, and the failure to recognize the expertise and capacity of Indigenous women themselves. While we look in depth of what family members and survivors' testimonies reveal about each of these rights in later chapters, here we will provide a brief overview of how looking at encounters and the relationship they engender in relation to human rights, Indigenous rights, and Indigenous laws and ways of knowing as expressed through stories offers a new and powerful way to address the historic, ongoing, and current root causes that lead to violence against Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people today. All right, I'm going to leave it there. And I'm going to say thank you. You were like my only person that followed me. So thank you for listening. And I'm going to try to do this again next week. And maybe I'll read. Maybe other folks will listen. I don't know. So, or have more questions. And we'll go from there. So anyway, thanks for listening while you were cooking and sharing with me that you read Richard Wagamese. And maybe I'll see you a little more online now that we're kind of connected. The algorithms are such a funny thing on these social medias. So anyway, I am going to say goodbye for now.